Hello. This is Antje from Byte Shuffle. Thank you for always watching our videos. This time, I put together a guide on how to navigate the matchup against UB Reanimator when playing Doomsday, including sideboard strategies. This is part 3 of my match video series against INF. Once again, I'm grateful to share feedback from INF in this video. I hope you'll stick around until the end. There's also a link to the pile breakdown video in the description, so feel free to check it out. Here is the deck list we will be using this time. If you lean too heavily on creatures and planeswalkers, the deck starts to feel like a strictly worse version of UB Tempo, which is hard to ignore. That's why I've decided to test out the One Ring starting this time. Initially, Beseech the Mirror was included in the list, but after some testing and adjustments, it was cut, leaving only the One Ring in the deck. I'll keep this hand since it looks like I can go all in on turn 1. I'll counter it with Force of Will. I'm going all in. From here, I'll increase the mana needed for the combo. Since it's likely that at least one Wasteland will hit, I'll include an island and a Cavern of Souls in the pile. If I only include an island in the pile, I'll end up passing the turn more times, so I'll pair it with a fetch land. Since I'm currently ahead in terms of speed, I'll include Force of Will in the pile to avoid losing to a faster play from the opponent. I built a pile in the following order: Island Thassa's Oracle, Cavern of Souls, Force of Will, fetch land. The opponent cast Ponder and chose not to shuffle. Since there were only 4 cards left in the pile, I should have cracked the fetch land and cast Brainstorm at that timing, but that was a mistake. As a result, I couldn't cast my draw spells in response to the opponent's Orcish Bowmasters. So I ended up using Daze instead. However, judging from my remaining life total, I feel like I should have let the Orcish Bowmasters resolve at that point. I'll put the Surveilled card into the graveyard. I'll win the game with Thassa's Oracle. Before sideboarding, I'd like to review the list we used. First, the conclusion. I will explain it step by step. Since the opponent is using a graveyard-based deck, I think there's no objection to siding in Nihil Spellbomb. We'll take out Unearth instead. That's because we're focusing on a fast combo plan this time, and Unearth doesn't contribute much to that strategy. I'll explain more about this later, but if both players aim for a long game, the Doomsday player tends to be at a disadvantage. Normally, this slot would be taken by Cabal Ritual, but since we're prioritizing speed this time, we're removing Unearth instead of Cabal Ritual. Now, let's take a look at the individual cards. Here are the cards from UB Reanimator that can impact Doomsday. First, to deal with cards like Daze, Force of Will, Thoughtseize, Consign to Memory, and Force of Negation, we add Duress and Flusterstorm. Next is Orcish Bowmasters. If it's on the battlefield, it places restrictions on our card draw. Therefore, we take out Street Wraith. This is because Street Wraith becomes the weakest cycler when Orcish Bowmasters is on the battlefield, and also because after cycling it, there's a chance the opponent could reanimate it using a reanimation spell. Additionally, we take out Omen of the Sea. This is because we're taking a speed-oriented combo approach this time, and a 2-mana draw source is too slow for that tempo. Next, we have Tamiyo, Inquisitive Student. It allows the opponent to reuse discard spells or counter spells from the graveyard. Also, the opponent will likely keep removal spells in anticipation of our creature-based plan. As a result, the opponent's deck is structurally better suited for the long game. In my opinion, if Doomsday leans too heavily into creatures and planeswalkers, it lacks both sufficient removal and threats in the deck, making it feel like an inferior version of UB Tempo. Since there's no clear path to victory if we keep fighting on the opponent's terms, this time we'll go with a fast combo plan. By choosing a fast combo plan, Orcish Bowmasters becomes a major challenge, but aside from that, the opponent tends to run out of effective sideboard options, making this approach seem quite reasonable. Because of the disadvantage posed solely by Tamiyo, we generally avoid including creatures like Barrowgoyf or Shieldred in our list. However, when our creature plan aligns well with the opponent's sideboard or game plan, it can still be a solid approach. If the opponent has sided out all of their removal, this might be a good opportunity to pivot to a fast creature-based plan. It may be harder to tell online, but this is a technique that's quite practical in tabletop play. For example, in Game 2, if you win with a fast combo plan and your opponent sees that your deck contains no creatures. At that point, right before Game 3, if your opponent reaches for their sideboard, it could be a great opportunity to switch strategies. I believe the best approach is to prepare your Game 3 sideboard package during Game 2 and quickly swap it in without alerting your opponent. Next, I'd like to explain specifically how to make the sideboard switch. First, bring in 3 copies of Barrowgoyf and 1 copy of Shieldred the Apocalypse. Then, take out all copies of Personal Tutor. Next, reduce the number of Thassa's Oracle to the minimum necessary to still be able to execute the Doomsday combo. Take out Lion's Eye Diamond. That concludes the explanation of how to transition into the fast creature-based plan. Lastly, Surgical Extraction is sometimes included in their sideboard. I won't go into specific examples here, but if you want to learn how to play around it, please check out the pile explanation video where examples are introduced. I'll keep this hand since it looks like I can go all in on turn 1. I'm going all in. From here, I'll increase the mana needed for the combo. Now that I've ramped up my mana, I'll scout ahead. I took Force of Will. I took Reanimate. I fetched an island to play around Wasteland. First, the reason I used Hand Disruption to take Reanimate is that, at this point, I have the advantage in terms of speed. Consigned to Memory is seeing less play across the meta compared to before. Therefore, it's likely that losing to the opponent's reanimation package is a higher risk than being disrupted by Consigned to Memory. The reason I discarded Reanimate with discard was because doing so would likely give me a time buffer, as it delays the opponent from assembling their reanimation package in hand. Since I have a basic island on the battlefield, I'll aim to build a pile that wins unless the opponent has Consigned to Memory. It's about time for Orcish Bowmasters to appear, so I'll include Consider in the pile. If Consider gets countered, the kill turn will be delayed. To avoid losing immediately to the reanimation package, I'll include Nihil Spellbomb in the pile. I'll fill the rest of the pile with Edge of Autumn, as it's less affected by Orcish Bowmasters and can't be countered. Here, I'd like to share INF's feedback. I received feedback that both the fast combo plan and the fast creature plan are valid approaches for sideboarding. Regarding the pile in Game 2, since it takes at least 2 turns for the Reanimator package to combo off, they reanimate something at the fastest possible speed. It likely won't have much impact on the board or my hand. Therefore, Nihil Spellbomb doesn't seem necessary. On the other hand, Consigned to Memory is probably the most likely way to lose, so I should prioritize playing around it. Additionally, since the opponent likely runs only a few removal spells and they would need to find Consigned to Memory with a draw spell during this timing, it's unlikely they'll have it right away. Therefore, it was suggested that including a second copy of Thassa's Oracle in the pile is probably the best approach. Specifically, I was advised that the best pile configuration would be Thassa's Oracle Cavern of Souls 1 card, like Ponder or Edge of Autumn, Consider. Alright, let's return to the point where I've just finished building my pile. I built a pile in the following order: Thassa's Oracle Cavern of Souls, Edge of Autumn, Nihil Spellbomb, Consider. The opponent drew without shuffling both times after casting Ponder. I'll start drawing through the pile with the pile opener. The Surveil effect sends the card to the graveyard. I hope they don't have consigned to memory. Lastly, I have an announcement. I'm posting the concepts behind the images used in my videos, as well as small flavor-inspired stories, in the YouTube community section. Additionally, I'm selling merch for the channel through the link in the description. If you're interested, be sure to check it out. Thank you for watching up to this point. I apologize for the many play mistakes. I hope to improve at MTG together with everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving it a thumbs up. See you next time. This is Antya.